On behalf of the School of Humanities, I welcome you to this third SRI seminar. We have two speakers this morning. Firstly, we will have Mr. Sakaya Botu, followed by Professor Mark Solon. The first presenter, Mr. Sakaya Botu, is the Executive Dean of the School of Humanities. He has a master's degree in education, a Bachelor of Education with honors, Bachelor of Education and Diploma in Teaching, all from the University of Goroka, and an Executive Master of Business Administration from the University of Papua New Guinea. He was a lecturer in the Division of Business Studies before taking up the role of Executive Dean, School of Humanities. Mr. Botu will speak this morning on the core business, or the core functions of universities. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Botu to give his presentation.
One thing common to all universities is they aim to reach instructional, professional, academic, and research excellence through enabling policies and strategies which are embedded in the strategic plan. In my view, most universities focus on their core business. All support systems or support services must be in place and working effectively to support the core business of the university. What is central to my presentation this morning is core university business. Core university business comprises 4 major functions. 1, curriculum and teaching. 2, operations. 3, research. And 4, engagement. Curriculum and teacher coexist in any university. They are inseparable because they depend on each other. Curriculum is what the teacher teaches, including the content covered in a course of study, the learning outcomes, the methods of assessment, and resources that are used in delivering a course of study. The key outcome of any curriculum is to transfer knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values to the students. The teacher becomes very, very important in the transfer of that knowledge, skills, values, and attitudes. So the teacher is the key medium through which a curriculum is delivered in an intended manner to exceed expected learning outcomes. Course design is a very, very important part of the curriculum development process. The design of each course of study must be specific. The specification include the qualification to be awarded upon completion of a course of study, the structure of the course of study, duration of the course of study, and modes of delivery relevant to the course of study. It may be face-to-face, distance, online, or blended. Units of each course of study, entry requirements for each course of study, and the pathways. Pathways comprise pathways to further learning and also exit pathways, expected learning outcomes, methods of assessment, and indicative student workload in terms of learning hours required in each course of study. Compulsory requirements for completion must be specified as well, and where a course of study leads to honors or masters, the course must include the nature of the research or research-related study. Still on course design, content and learning activities must include current knowledge in a course of study or in an academic discipline. It must be informed by current research, matching concepts and practices that are also informed by current research and advances in practice. The study of underlying theoretical concepts or frameworks of an academic discipline. Teaching and learning activities must be arranged very carefully to achieve the expected learning outcomes, and it must be done in a progressive and coherent manner. Each course of study must enable expected learning outcomes regardless of the student's place of study or the mode of delivery. Number 5, where professional accreditation is required for graduates to be eligible to practice, the course of study must be accredited by a relevant professional body. Each course of study must meet expected qualification standards framework. To me, operations involves activities related to administrative systems or support functions. Human resource or staffing function is responsible to ensure that each course of study has sufficient staff to meet educational, academic support, and administrative needs of students who are undertaking the course. All teaching staff must have contemporary knowledge and skills informed by current research. All teaching staff are expected to have a qualification at least one level higher than is awarded for the course of study. There must be a right mix of staff to take care of each course of study. The choice is top-heavy, middle-heavy, or bottom-heavy, whichever is appropriate. Finance function is responsible to comply with principles and standards guiding the use of public funds, including the Financial Management Act and the audit requirements. Universities must invest in core university functions through proper mechanisms, in this case, through the budgetary process. Sometimes universities experience financial constraints. This happens when the economic climate is unfavorable. In the event of unfavorable economic climate, the government revenue drops. When that happens, the grant that universities get from the government is affected. And so the limited grant coming from the government to universities cannot accommodate all the administrative and academic operations of the university. What does that mean? Universities must opt for alternate revenue sources, not necessarily increasing student fees. So what universities should begin to think and do is they should think like businesses and operate like businesses. Learning and development function is responsible for institutional development plans. Part of this function is to ensure that facilities and infrastructure are fit for educational and research purposes, including classrooms, laboratories, equipment, and other related facilities. Learning environment must fit to accommodate student diversity and equity through enabling policies. For us here at the University of Goroka, we do have students with special needs. Learning environment must be suitable for those students with special needs. There must be continuous maintenance and improvement activities. Student administration function is also very, very important. Student administration is responsible to manage all student information or data. All information and advice given to students must be guided by applicable policies. Accurate, relevant, and timely information must be available to the users, including prospective students, current students, and those who are interested. Information and records must be secured and maintained confidentiality. Admission policies or processes are applied fairly and consistently. Marketing is another important support function. Marketing is a business concept. In business, no marketing means no sales. No sales means no profits. The shareholders will lose big time. The concept is also relevant to the academic industry. No marketing, no students. No students, no graduate outputs. And therefore, universities must have the hungry spirit of marketing process of study. Universities must invest in marketing. To me, marketing is not a cost center. It is a profit center. University of Goroka, in my view, does not have a marketing space. Let's create a marketing space so that this will facilitate marketing of our courses. Information technology is responsible for IT infrastructure. That is very, very important. IT infrastructure must be fit to accommodate all academic, administrative, and research needs. Access to electronic information and adequate electronic communication service must be available continuously to staff and students, with some allowances for maintenance of the system. Electronic learning management or electronic learning platforms must be secured with timely access to the system, having training done for the users of the system. Library, as we all know, is a university of its own. The professors, the scholars, the researchers are in the library collections. Library collections must be sufficient to accommodate the needs of different student cohorts. Library services must be accessible to all users, including staff, students, and others. Universities must invest in replenishment of stock and improvement. This is important because the library collections must be kept up to date and current. Student welfare function is responsible for the general well-being and safety of students, including health services and welfare services. Counseling, sometimes students are given legal advice, accommodation for students, and advocacy. Quality assurance function is responsible to ensure that quality and standards are met. Each course of study is approved or accredited only when two important requirements are met. One, institutional standards. So all courses of study that we develop, in the case of the University of Goroka, must pass through the internal processes for endorsement and approval before it is offered to students. And secondly, higher education standards framework. In Papua New Guinea, we have PNG, National Qualification Framework. Policies, processes, and processes to protect academic and research integrity and monitoring, reviewing, and improving course of study must be readily available for implementation. Where a course of study is delivered with partners, the course of study must also meet higher education standards framework. Research is conducted in accordance to a research policy framework. So all research activities are guided by what we call a research policy framework. This research policy framework guides the following activities: ethical research conduct and research practice, clarification of ownership and management of intellectual property, successful management of research partnerships, clarification of requirements for publication and authorship, resolution of allegations of misconduct in research. Research training is also conducted in accordance to an institutional training policy framework. This institutional training policy framework guides the following activities: recognition of rights and responsibilities of research students and supervisors, induction and orientation of research students and supervisors to their roles, monitoring of the progress of research students, assessment and examination of students' work, independence of examiners, presentation and communication of research output by students, and dispute resolution. Engagement function involves networking and exploring opportunities for national and international collaboration and partners. Such opportunities pave the way for both staff and students to gain from advanced courses, collaborative research, and exchange programs. In my view, collaboration among universities can be strengthened through common forums. For example, Higher Education Summit. This forum can bring together the brains, the think tanks, the mouths, the politicians who sometimes talk too much and don't fully understand the functions of universities and other stakeholders to discuss common issues in pursuit of achieving shared goals. Universities are always silenced by the environment, as you can see in this illustration. University is right in the center of the inner circle. The inner circle represents the internal environment. Within the internal environment, there are factors, internal factors. I have listed only a few here, like internal politics. No organization exists without internal politics. Department demands, employees demands, organizational demands. These internal factors bring silence to the organization or universities. These internal factors are easy to control because they are there within the university. The outer circle represents the external environment, and this external environment consists of very, very big external factors like technology, legal, culture, industry demand, social factors, economic factors, political factors, natural factors, and there could be many others. These factors impose great challenges on the functions of universities. Because they are coming from outside, it is very difficult to control at times. But universities must take some actions to mitigate the challenges that are coming from the external environment. I have just provided a few examples of environmental challenges and strategic actions that universities can take to mitigate the challenges coming from especially the external environment. The government priority on research fields is a challenge to the university. So universities must now begin to align research fields to the national research agenda. The government took a decision in 2017 to unify, reform, and transform the higher education sector. Following that government decision, we know that colleges have been transferred to DHEST. And what does that mean to universities in Papua? Universities must design and offer courses of study to meet the needs of college lecturers. Some of them may be teaching with bachelor degree. They must have a master's qualification in order to be a lecturer in a college. The government priority now is also on the STEM subjects. Strategic action that the universities can take is to design and offer courses of study in STEM. Also, we hear of the education reform. There is a shift in the curriculum paradigm from outcome-based curriculum to student-based curriculum. What does that mean to universities? We need to design and offer courses of study to meet the needs of teachers who are teaching in high schools, grade 7 and 8. Where there is unfavorable economic climate, the government revenue is affected. When the government revenue is affected, there is budget cut. The grant that universities get from the government is not to their expectations. So the strategic action that universities can consider is opt for alternate sources of revenue. Sometimes universities may think that increasing student fees is a solution. In my view, that is not a solution. Some important plans must be delayed until the economic climate is favorable and universities are receiving sufficient funds. The population growth, looking at the social and demographic factor, children are producing children. Population growth rate is increasing. There are so many people who will be needing education at all levels. There are many students entering high schools, secondary schools. Not many of them are having access to university education or higher education due to so many factors, including the limited space in learning institutions. So universities must create opportunities for accessibility to higher education. Technology, globally, we are in the IT era. All university wants to look at IT for learning and teaching. So universities must invest IT infrastructure to promote online teaching and learning. In conclusion, universities do not exist alone, but embedded within a complex environment. The way universities do business is affected due to natural, social, political, economic, cultural, and technological changes. The role of the universities is to scan the environment very carefully, assess the trend in environmental change, and take appropriate actions to mitigate these challenges.
Research is a big activity, but sometimes it can be a mystery to many of us. Sometimes we say, research is not my job, it's somebody else's job. But the university must do research. I am in the university, but it's not my job. I hope that some of this presentation will begin to give us an opportunity to at least remember one or two or three things that we will all need to do to conduct research. It is very simple to say the word research, but when we get to the bottom of it, what I call when the rubber meets the road, the practical element of getting and doing research, it can become a mystery. So I hope that this presentation will give us the opportunity to at least start. Where do I start? How do I start? What is involved? Are there any ways to do research? So that's the aim of this seminar and the presentation. 2 weeks ago, I started with the idea of what is research, the definition of research. Now, I want to share with you, and at the end of the presentation, I think there are some of us, or many of us here, would be familiar with some of these concepts. And if they were not concepts, maybe steps, but they also include concepts. So maybe at the end, we can all contribute. We can all give our component of it. We can ask questions. That will be the aim and purpose of our seminar generally, and the aim and purpose of this presentation. An abstract, of course, comes only after you and I have done our research, and we want to report our findings. And first things that we present in seminars, what is your abstract? It is basically a summary of your research, the research you have done. When we go to the practical element, the first question is, you want to do research? Your supervisor might say, what is your topic? What do you want to do? What do you want to find out? So that is often the first exercise. You must think about what you want to research about, what you want to explore. So choosing your topic is an important step in conducting your research or our research. Then the next question is, how do I choose my topic? Generally, your topic must be based on an issue or a challenge or a problem that may be challenging your community or challenging your government or challenging your organization and needs answers to. So, what's the issue? You identify an issue or the problem or a research question or a hypothesis so that you can now begin to plan and develop strategies to answer that hypothesis or address that issue or problem. In research, there is this big word that they call framework or paradigm. And when people ask you, what's your paradigm? What is the paradigm that is guiding your research? And as soon as some of us, when we hear that word paradigm, we stop breathing. Because of course, it's a foreign word. It's a language that we researchers try to attempt to explain. You will hear words like positivism, interpretism, feminism. These are so-called some of the philosophies or guidelines that researchers argue about. How do you get ideas and how do you collect your ideas and the themes? So, just very quickly, positivism, they tend to think about quantifying the data. It's a positive view. Experiments, you do survey, statistics, and your answer must be straightforward. No questions about it. One approach, another approach is a so-called interpretive approach, and that is more on qualitative data approach. That area is more subject about, it's not as straightforward. You can't quantify it, but you can, it's more subjective. You can look at various ways of looking at things and then try to interpret and give meanings to those. These are general. And then of course, one area that tends to come in is a feminist approach. That approach basically says that comes from the perspective that we have at least two genders. And there is the feminist approach is that it's based on the argument that sometimes we don't have a balanced view of how life changes, how we live our lives. We tend to be, use the word male approach. All man tas all. All male must be long idea of you plan. So this idea of feminist approach comes from the fact that there are women. We are a balanced society. Both the genders contribute to information, and we create meanings. We create information through the way we behave, the way we do things, we practice. So women perspective and men's perspective need to be coordinated, and so we should see balance and learn from the way we do things. So research, some research say, okay, this area seems to be neglected, and therefore we must work on it. The next method is the so-called methodology. It's basically about ways in which we are going to conduct our research. And then with that methodology, we have approaches. And some of the common ways of approaching your research is either the qualitative approach, which follows this idea of giving meaning. It's not as positive, it's not direct with the answers, but you learn by observing the environment, by studying it, by getting information from people, and then giving meaning, trying to interpret it based on the questions that you have raised in relation to your topic. The other approach, of course, is the quantitative approach, and that probably comes from the idea of positivism, be as direct. Your facts must be right. So there's a tendency about it is the concept that comes around, or the approach that goes with it, is the quantitative approach, where we often use numbers. Some numbers directly will say, this is what it means. So statistics will come in. You have to look for instruments that can analyze your stats if you're going to use what they call a survey approach, and you can use numbers. Those are some ways of, what we call the quantitative approach. One area also in the methodology is the population of your study. You will be asked, who are you going to study? Or what are you going to study? Now, often I must say that what I'm presenting now is probably more practical to the social sciences and the educationists. The sciences might more go on the idea of the quantitative approach, doing experiments so that you carefully observe your experiments and your results to see if you can, arrive ever at a position about your hypothesis or your research questions. But okay, coming back to this idea of so-called population. What's your population? And when they say population, we think about number of people in a country and all that. But no, population in research is about who are the people that your study is going to be directed towards. And sometimes that population may be so high that your study may not be able to get everybody. Ideally, if you can get everybody's opinion on a particular subject, that would probably be the best. Then you can argue that, yes, my conclusion can be generalized to everybody because I covered everybody that I want to, this research is about. Unfortunately, due to time and resources, you may not be able to do that. So, the way to go about it is first you identify your primary population, but then you say, I am going to just focus my study with some of the groups, not all, because I cannot do it. I don't have the resources. I don't have the time. So I'm going to focus on these resources, and that's what the idea of sampling becomes your way about it. You highlighted selective samples that you can assume that will represent to some degree the views of the bigger population. So thus this idea of sampling comes in. You only sample some of the groups. But when you sample, you go even narrow it further, and there is this terminology called random sampling. Random sampling is you because of the big population, how do you select all of them? Do you go the one-talk system, or do you go to only those people who speak your language, or how do you represent a big group? So some words that go with sampling is like random sampling. You might say to yourself, okay, of all these people of us sitting here, we will go through the row, and every 10 people you will participate, or I will ask you to participate in the research. Even then, you cannot generalize and say that my results covers everybody. So later on you will come with the idea and the term that is called limitation and delimitation of your study. The more word is delimitation. You build a fence or circle around your study so that the ideas that you are going to come, you select from these people, and there will be the best people that will tell you, give you some of the answers to your research questions. And the third, the other one is convenience sampling. For example, if you're doing a study on children in primary schools, your study might be representing Papua New Guinea, but obviously if you have limited time, you have 1 semester to do your research, or you have 1 year to do your research, then you may have to look for what we call a convenient way to do your research in time, but again, you must justify it. But anyway, these are some of the ideas of how you can select your population of study. We want to look at this idea of validity and reliability. This concept also is an important one. Again, all the methodologies that we build up in preparing our research, and here we're looking at about 9 to 10 of them, they all are related to these two concepts, validity and reliability of your research. So for example, with your methodology, other people will come and try to follow what you have done in conducting your research to find out if they did the same research that you did, will they come up with the same results? That's some of the questions that are asked about research presentation. When they ask about your research methodology, how did you collect your information? Who did you collect them from? Where did you collect it from? Why did you collect it from that group and not other groups? That are issues that are asked about whether your research can be relied on, and whether your research is valid enough to support your findings. Those are some of the questions that will be asked when we present our research. And the way they will ask you is that they will look at your methodology. How did you construct your methods of collecting data? And is that method and the tools and the instruments that you're collecting your research, are they related to the purpose, significance of your study? And more importantly, your research questions are very, very important. At the end of the day, when we present our research results, and in our cases, especially if our researches are going to be examined by external examiners, that's what they are going to ask us as well. So those are some of the ways of validity and reliability. And again, your data collection tools are connected. Same questions. What kind of instruments did you use to collect the data? Did you use a survey approach? Did you use questions to interview? How did you do your interviews? Did you do a big group interviews? And again, questions about reliability of those. If you're going to do interviews with so many people, do you have time to get their answers in and collect them? So these are small questions, but we must think about them when we are conducting our research. We must be able to prove to the community that we are presenting our results to, and this is not limited. This is an opportunity where you would be presenting to a wider group. Seminar presentation internationally, nationally, in groups, in presentations such as this. Questionnaire, developing your interview questions. It's very easy to say that, yeah, I'll just ask them some questions and then I'm okay. No. Your interview questions must be directed towards your research questions. Your research results and your research will pass if your data answers the research questions that you pose when planning, or answers the hypothesis or otherwise. Again, it does not have to answer. If the data speaks differently and says, no, it does not answer the question, that means you may need to go back and redesign your questions or your questionnaire to make sure that they are answering your research questions. Next one is data analysis. Data analysis is basically how do you analyze the data. We must reflect on it, and we must think about it before we go out collecting the data. Again, it's the data that we are going to collect. Is it going to answer those research questions or answer the hypothesis? If they don't, then you will need to reconstruct the data. So it is important that researchers must take time to reflect very closely those questions that we are going to raise, so that when you collect information on it and when you come back to analyze, they should be answering the research question or the hypothesis. If you are doing an experiment, similarly, but maybe an experiment may be depending on the results. But other research like social and educational research, answering those research questions are key, because you cannot just draw your answers from any generally and say that's yes and no. You have to answer those research questions in order to say that your research is complete. So analysis is the same. So okay, you're doing a quantitative approach to data collection, then you will have to use statistical processes to be able to quantify and draw conclusions from your data. The most common one that people would use is what they call content analysis. The content analysis is basically you study the content of what you have collected, your data, very closely, and then draw from what your responses are telling you to cue to your research questions. And based on your research question and on the data that you have collected, you content analyze them by looking at into so-called themes. You develop themes that will come out from your research questions or your research hypothesis. We don't just say, okay, I think this is the right thing. But if you don't have it in your plan, then your research is going to be cued. Because these are cues that basically allow those who are reading your research and the results of your research, and more importantly, your thesis or dissertation, to see if you focus on your research question or your hypothesis. If not, then you have not answered your research question. And something went wrong in the process. So again, data analysis helps, and I've just given just two quick examples. And then, of course, your findings. Then you report your findings. If you have followed some of these processes and outline them very closely so that they can see logic in your planning, they can see sequencing, the intellectual processing of those information to arrive at the questions that you have raised. Then you report your findings. Okay, in findings, if we are writing our research thesis, for example, a key question that often comes up with the findings is that after you go to findings, one of the chapters in our thesis or dissertation is discussion. How do you discuss your ideas, your findings? And most often, if we do not carefully follow that, we will tend to repeat ourselves some of the things that we've said in previous chapters. While they may be relevant, there's a tendency for us to repeat, because sometimes we reach the idea of what they call research fatigue. We've been at it for many semesters or couple of years, and the system needs rest and a bit of time to reflect. But when it comes towards the end of the chapters and all that, there is a tendency to go through that experience of research fatigue, and we may end up repeating. So I'm sorry, I may be presenting in a more negative way, but these are just some practical activities, experiences that we may encounter as we go through that process. What is done in the discussions of the finding is basically we look at the results of our study in the first instance? What did the results brought us up to? What is our results? How do we discuss that? We discuss it by comparing it with previous research that have been done in the area of our study. And the next question that follows is, how do I know about the various research? Literature review. The literature review is the one that tells you, or you get the opportunity to review as much as possible all the relevant literature that are related to your topic. Now, this is when you become the master of that knowledge. You master that knowledge because you have read widely about all research and all writings about that particular area, so that if anyone asks you in that field, you should be able to say, yeah, I heard about that, or so and so said this about that topic related to my study area. And that's where your literature review is very important, and associated with that literature review is that idea of writing a good summary of that literature. Going through the various sources and writing the summary so that you are aware of what other researchers have done, so that you become the master of your topic and your subject. That's how you learn, and then you add knowledge to that subject by your results. Your results then will add, because you can say to others that have gone before the significance of a research, significance of your research for policy, for planning, and for knowledge. And of course, if you do that, then the opportunity is for you to report it. For those of us who do research in the postgraduate level and are required to do your dissertation or your thesis, is to write it down based on the structure of thesis writing. And of course, thesis writing is also part of the academic writing that you have to master as part of your contribution and your participation in the academic activity. And of course, publication, journals are available. You have an opportunity to publish internationally, and go to the area of writing books. Lastly, one of the most important issues about research is referencing. Referencing is an indication that you have read widely on your subject and your topic, and you also give opportunities to those who follow you in conducting your research, that these are the areas that are related to my research, and if you want to find more, you can go and look at that research referencing. And that is also important for our so-called in-text referencing. But in-text referencing is basically the referencing inside the paragraphing and your reporting. But the actual details about where the sources is must appear in your reference list. Many times we tend to forget. And in these days we can copy paste very quickly, but forget about the research, the references. References are the test. Your examiners and our lecturers, others who are reading your text, will want to see where you got those sources from, because we don't know everything about life. We don't know everything about what others have done. We can only do that by reading a lot more and summarizing and appreciating what they have written before. And it also is an obligation for us to tell others where we got our information from, so that they can follow us as well and check if what we're saying is based on previous research. Somare Institute and the dream of the University of Goroka to excel in research can only happen if we do research and if we publish and share those information. Only then can our ranking about University of Goroka going into the top place in research will hit the top level, hopefully excellent. Cannot be done unless we do research. And I trust that some of these discussions and hopefully later discussions will encourage us to begin to think research, plan research, and conduct research so that hopefully 5 to 10 years from now, UOG should become the leading research university in Papua New Guinea. I hope that we all can contribute to that, and I trust that this presentation would at least set something in our mind to begin to think research. Thank you.
I will now call on Pro-Vice-Chancellor, Academic Research and Innovation, Dr. Landu.
All of us should be here. I was happy that you shared about ways of doing research. We can all gain from that. I'm in administration, I also do research. And believe me, I learned a lot from the talks I had today. And I'll try to come more often, because it's only when we come and listen to others that we can learn and also be able to contribute and be part of this dynamic environment of learning and sharing, academic sharing. If we don't take advantage of this, it will be like we'll be drawn downwards into the masses. You know, you are at the university. Here in this place, you are very high level of learning. But then you go to the village, and if you stay in the village, you will begin to sit down and play cards, talk the politics of the village. You will be drawn down to the masses. You should be drawn upwards, you know, like you come here and we here at the university, you know, sometimes we become disillusioned by, you know, word talks about corruption and talks about this, you know, like we'll like keep being drawn downwards. We should be like moving upwards, and opportunities like this where we learn from others and listen and contribute to the debate and discussion, it will help us to keep afloat rather than descend into the depths of the ocean. So that's it. The top management team supports research. Now the Somare Research Institute, with Dr. Awis leading, man, we are fully behind it. We are having very big plans for it, because we believe in really driving research at this university. No, now when you are young, that's your time to contribute. So come and be part of this environment, learn about the tools of research. You know, the biggest discoveries in history are made by people in the 20s. When you are in your 20s and 40s, you already lapun. You know, you can still contribute, yes, definitely. You can, through experience, you will contribute. And you will be able to, but when you're in your 20s, that's your time to make your mark. You know. So we must encourage young people to come and learn the skills and just, you know, go for it. If you don't know the skills, you will not be able to contribute. If you don't know it, you will have big dreams, but you'll be a dreamer. You might as well go and smoke marijuana. They're dreamers. They dream big dreams, but they don't have the tools to deliver. You know. We want to dream, but also have the pathway, the tools, the mechanisms for delivering on the dream. And here, this is where you learn it here. When you hear, you know, like Professor Solon and Mr. Botu, who are experienced researchers, academics, they come and talk. So young people will learn from that and be encouraged, be part of this academic environment. So that's basically the top management team is fully supportive of the research agenda. We are going to help it move ahead to new waters. We're just going to just keep moving ahead. We want to be leaders in the world, so it's not like we are behind on a tail. No, we want to be in the forefront. We want to have the motion towards excellence, do the very best for university. People in Papua New Guinea, they look at the University of Goroka as leaders in education. So when we go for big discussions with other universities, say if you want to know engineering, you go to Unitec. They will advise you. For medicine and for law and things like that, UPNG will advise you. Education, they look at the University of Goroka. They say, these are the experts in the field, so ask them. So we must not only just in the teaching, the set teaching guides we have, but also in research, be able to show them that we are leaders in the field of education. So the top management team is supporting research in all fields, but especially in education. Thank you.
And I now open the floor up for any questions and general discussions related to the two presentations.
You have a recipe to bake a cake, and you expect a person or a cook to bake a good cake. And to bake a good cake, you can say, here is the recipe, here are the ingredients, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, for example. And I'm saying that's excellent. And I'm thinking the best cake will be baked when the cook is shown what to do step by step until you know how to bake the cake. I'm just giving an example of research. So I'm not criticizing, but I'm saying it's good to go through some of the things that really make a successful researcher produce good stuff. And one example I like to point out is the language of academic writing that's needed in writing a thesis. How do you write it? I believe students blunder through this because they don't know the kind of words to put into writing. Academic writing is absolutely important, and there's a need to practice this. And then the students or researchers will write precisely.
We learn the hard way. And one approach is what I would call read, 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 and read. That experience is important. The more we read and the more we expose ourselves to the academic writing styles, the more we absorb it. Even when we don't think about it. The more we read, the more we absorb the vocabulary, the more we get the feel of the structure in which sentences are constructed. And in this case, it's the English language. That's a starting point. But yes, I think for us here, we will need that support from perhaps, the various divisions that are dealing with that. For example, our language and literature, our academic support team here. We need to have people in there who are also structured, who can readily help us to present our ideas and to write our thesis or to write our papers. But more importantly, we are responsible. You and I are responsible for what we write, and therefore we take the first responsibility to do writing, to write, to read, and to learn to say exactly what we want to say. But in our academic writing is to write exactly what we want to write and what it means. In academic writing, there is no such thing as in other words. You can't explain yourself in other words. You get to the point, every word that you write in your paragraph must mean exactly what you want to say, and you want others to read. You have no opportunity to explain yourself, because your work is independently being read by somebody else, and your message is in the writing of it. It is a challenge, yes. As part of our progress towards the dream, we need to facilitate ourselves and learn to write so that we can write what we want to say. And often that is a challenge for all of us when we want to publish. The publishers will look at the style that we write in, and they will determine whether we are comparatively in tune with the rest of the world, and especially with the level of the journals and publication agencies that are disseminating our knowledge. I run the risk of getting into too much detail. Thank you.
May I invite Ms. Anne Micah to bring a bouquet of flowers for Dr. Bill Sagir as a token of appreciation. After 2 weeks, we will have the School of Science and Technology present, and so we asked that School of Science and Technology work very closely with the coordinator, who is Mr. Alois. School of Science and Technology staff members work very closely with him to send your abstracts and your bio to him so that he can coordinate that with the Somare Research Institute to facilitate a very similar presentation like today. And we encourage staff members to present, because this is an opportunity. We'd like to create this platform for you. It's costing us money. We want to really maximize and utilize this. So if we can encourage more academics to participate in such conversations, that would be greatly appreciated. Also, we invite students, especially students who are taking Research Method 1 and 2, and postgraduate students to attend this presentation, because as you've seen, great presentations is being delivered. And the guidelines of research that was presented by Professor Mark Solon is the critical element that you must include when you are doing research at all levels. So we encourage you to attend these presentations. Also, we encourage staff members to attend such presentations, because if you are on staff development plan and if you would like to do a postgraduate studies within UOG or within Papua New Guinea or abroad, you have to know how to do research, and you must master the guidelines of research and the principles of research that Professor Solon presented today. So all the staff members are encouraged to come and attend such presentations to develop your research projects for future. Additionally, we will be making announcement of research funding for academics, and so we will send a call for research proposals to be funded by University Research and Publication Basket. There'll be a meeting on the 11th of May for University Research and Publication Committee, and so now till 11th of May we ask academics at the university to identify a topic or an issue that you've heard or you've seen or you've experienced that you'd like to develop it into a research project. We ask that you prepare a proposal. There is a guideline for research proposal, but the guideline that Professor Solon presented today is very similar, and we'll share this with you. But if you've taken note, begin preparing your research proposals. And for every research, every new research proposals, they have to go through the ethics committee for clearance before you apply for research funding. So that's the process, and we will also communicate this by the end of today or by the end of this week. So that's an announcement for staff members. For postgraduate students, if you, as Dr. Landu mentioned, if you are part of a research team, that's the way forward for you to get some funding from University Research and Publication Committee to collaborate on a research project as a research team to explore your research project. So we again encourage collaborative research from postgraduate students and the senior staff members or the staff members at the university. Thank you. With this, I also want to draw your attention to our YouTube channel for Somare Research Institute. Now, we ask that you can subscribe to the Somare Research Institute YouTube channel. If you have missed out on any of the presentations previously, it's now available on Somare Research Institute YouTube channel. So click on it and click the subscription button and click a bell symbol that's there as well, so you can get instant notification of every seminar series that we present here at the University of Goroka. Also encourage your friends, staff members, encourage your students to subscribe and follow research and publication discussions at the University of Goroka.